That's a very beautiful song and very well played. Thank you, Heather. I really like that story from the Bible. I think it's kind of special. And a friend of mine in divinity school who is transgender actually won a competition doing a sermon about that story and taught me a lot about it. My friend said that when you translate the Hebrew, that word where they talk about the coat, which we sometimes hear technicolor dream coat or coat of many colors, the actual Hebrew word I can't pronounce, but it's only used in one other place in the whole book, the whole Hebrew Bible. And that's when a princess is talking about her clothes. So you could translate it as Joseph's princess dress. And so my friend did this wonderful reading of the story as that was the reason why Joseph's brothers attacked him, was because he was a little queer, maybe a lot of queer. And that because of his specialness, he was able to forgive them, and that we can too, and I really loved that. Now, in addition to having a master's in divinity, I also have a master's in gender studies. So I love talking about this kind of thing. This was my original jam, women's and gender studies, queerness, what even is gender, all that good stuff. I love it. And one thing I learned when I was doing my degree in gender studies was that we kind of think that, well, some people in our culture think that gender must be binary, that there must be two genders because there are two sexes, and so ha, and they think they won the argument. But the thing is that sex is also not binary. There is a spectrum of gender identity and expression. And so you may have seen this gender unicorn at some point. There's lots of different ways of thinking about your gender, expressing your gender, and there's also the sex characteristics that are the physical aspects. So that's anatomy, chromosomes, hormones, all that kind of good stuff. So we're talking about slightly different things. Sex and physical characteristics, and then gender, which is kind of all the ideas and labels that we put on those things. Now, the thing that really blew my mind is when I learned about intersex people. Some of you may have heard this, but for those who haven't, intersex folks are those whose physical characteristics are beyond the binary from the time when they're born. They have anatomy, like ambiguous genitalia. They have hormonal differences. They can even have different chromosomes, like instead of XX, which women have, and XY, females, and XY, which males have, you can have XXY. So even at the physical level, it's not binary. Some folks may have XX chromosomes, but external genitals that appear male. Some folks have testicles where ovaries may have been. There's a wide variety of the human body, and that tells us that this isn't that strange. This isn't unusual. This isn't made up. It exists from the time people are born. It's natural. It's estimated that 1% of people, so 1 out of every 100, is intersex. Not just transgender, intersex specifically. So in the US, with a population of, such a big number, 345,982,393, it's probably not that exact number, 1% of that number would be over 3.5 million intersex individuals. That's a significant portion. Now, when intersex babies are born, the doctors tend to look and try to see if the baby is male or female, but when a kid's born with ambiguous genitalia, the doctors kind of got to guess. They got to go, well, it kind of looks like this, or it kind of looks like that. And some babies, they have cosmetic surgery on them to make it fit the binary. Without the baby's consent, usually with the parents' consent, but not always. And then as those kids grow and their hormones start to not match their genitalia, sometimes hormones are used on those kids so that they can fit the binary. So when we hear one side of our culture talk about not using hormones and not affecting minors without their consent, it should apply to intersex kids too, who should be able to choose their own what happens to their bodies and what happens to their gender. Another interesting thing that blew my mind is that puberty blockers, which are sometimes used for trans kids who just want to wait a little longer before they have to decide what their gender is going to be, puberty blockers are already used on cisgender kids who have what's called precocious puberty. So if a young girl gets her period at 8, for example, they may use these puberty blockers to just give her some more time to mature. So that's something already normally in use, and something that most trans kids, that's the kind of thing they want. They don't necessarily want hormone changes or surgery when they're that young. They just want some time to figure it out. So when you hear people talk about gender assigned at birth, that's kind of what they're talking about. When these babies are born, the doctors kind of label them male or female based on our sort of preconceived notions of what those words mean. But there's such a wide variety. You could have a whole bunch of different sexes, not just 2. We sometimes think that all this transgender stuff is kind of new, but it really isn't. This has been happening for as long as humans have existed. They didn't just recently emerge, and we know that because transgender and intersex people exist all over the world, in all sorts of different cultures that weren't connected to each other. The reason it may seem new is because colonialism tamped it down and made it go away, repressed it for a long time. And now that colonialism is kind of falling away, people can be themselves a little bit more easily. But gender is varied across cultures. We've got a map here, and this map shows gender diverse cultures across the world. It's so spread out. It's not just in the West. It's not just a quirk of Western culture or something like that. It's all over the place, which tells you that this is natural and normal. There's lots of different kinds of people. These are the names of some of these different identities of gender diverse people. In Mexico, in Hawaii, in Thailand, all across the world, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, New Zealand, everywhere, there are people who express their genders beyond the binary. Of course, transgender and non-binary people here in the US as well. Even the way cisgender men and women, and if you're not familiar with that term, cisgender means that the way that you feel on the outside matches your physical characteristics. You feel comfortable with the label that you were given of female or male or woman or man, and that works for you. Even the way cisgender men and women express our genders differs across culture, right? There's Brack Wilkerson right out there wearing a kilt, right? And that's a very masculine way to dress in Scotland, and for those of Scottish descent. Hi, Brack. I'm so glad you wore your kilt today. So when you say girls wear skirts, that isn't necessarily true. The picture at the top left there are the Hijra of India. They're folks who were born and labeled as men, but grow to express themselves with more femininity. There are cultures all over the place that have variations, whether they identify themselves as beyond the binary or within the binary. I mean, if you think about priests, for example, I mean, those look like dresses to me. It's just about the cultural labels that we put on these different kinds of things. Who's allowed to wear what and why? But if you kind of take all that judgment off and just let people dress how they want to dress, it's a lot more freeing and safe for people. And don't even get me started about Cate Blanchett in a suit. Woo! In our story, Joseph didn't just dress fabulously. He was also a dreamer. He had predictions about how the world could be. And that is something that our LGBTQ peers and neighbors can give to us as well. What is a new way of being? How can we get out of the box that we think that we must remain in no matter what, and instead experiment a little, be a little more free? He also decided to have mercy on those who had really treated him badly. And that's incredibly inspiring because a lot of us, myself included, have really not been treated very kindly as queer folks, as transgender folks in the world. but we can act in a new way. We don't have to return unkindness with unkindness. Now, within the Unitarian Universalist world, a lot of congregations can become what's called a welcoming congregation. So that's where you do some work and you make sure that no matter who comes in the door, you are ready to welcome them, especially queer and trans folks. But the thing you may not know is that this is meant to be renewed every year. And I don't think ORUC has renewed it recently, so this might be a thing we think about. There are 5 practices to become a welcoming congregation. Sorry if that text is a little small. Become a welcoming congregation, which we have done. Welcoming worship services, which this is one. Welcoming days of observance, so things like the Transgender Day of Remembrance, Coming Out Day, Pride, all that good stuff. Welcoming religious education, so that's not just for our kiddos, we have OWL of course, but also for our adults. Brush-ups on, what does transgender mean? How do all these pronouns work? We could do classes on that stuff like that. And then supporting a welcoming project, and that could be donating money to a local LGBTQ nonprofit, that could be getting involved with the Youth Pride, which I know ORUC has done in the past, and I hopefully will do again. It's easy as that, but checking these things off renews our commitment to being welcoming to LGBTQ folks, which in our religious context is really, really important. I would love if this could become part of the cycle of the church year. This is just built in to how we do things. Oh, have we done a welcoming worship service? Oh, we need to do a welcoming religious education class, that kind of stuff. Now, I've been talking to lots of different folks in my first few months here, and one thing that I have heard is that some of our non-binary or gender-expansive members, sometimes they share their pronouns and they don't always get those pronouns that they've asked for. So that's one thing I really want to encourage us all to work on, is just to get those pronouns right. And if you do make a mistake, which happens, just say, oops, I'm sorry, and move on. You don't got to make a big deal out of it. But really, that makes an enormous difference, especially to our youth. Our youth who are learning how to express themselves, who may be a little nervous to correct an adult, but it means the world to them when you get it right. And it really hurts when we get it wrong. So, we can forgive each other, we can work to be better, we can be more welcoming. I also want to take a moment to, I've mainly been preaching here to the non-LGBTQ folks, right? I've been preaching to those who aren't familiar with intersex. I've been preaching to those who don't use non-binary pronouns. But I want to take a moment and preach directly to my queer peers. Hi. I love you. We really matter. And we make the world a better place. And the lies that people have tried to tell you that you can't be part of religion are false. Spirituality is only whole if we're all in. We emerged from the universe, or the gods, or the ground of being, just the way we are. And so we are natural. We are on purpose. We belong. We've been shaped by our environment and our experiences. We've had to listen to our hearts over a very loud world telling us how we should be, how we shouldn't be, and find our own truth through that. And it's amazing how resilient we have been, but I wish we hadn't had to be. I want to encourage us to trust ourselves, our hearts, our desires, our beauty, our bodies, our dreams. You are part of the interconnected web of being, and absolutely no one can take that away from you. It may take a while longer to make that paradise where people of all genders and sexualities can be themselves. But in the meantime, we find and make paradise, little ones like this, when we are together and when we choose to take risks to be authentic out loud. To the younger generations, there's only a little while longer I can call myself part of one of those. But millennials and younger who've kind of grown up with this swimming in the water, let us take a moment to be grateful to our lesbian, gay, bi, queer, and transgender elders. Let us be grateful, younger folks, to those who are still with us and those who have passed away. Elders, transcestors, queer sheroes, dear ones, the younger generations are unspeakably grateful to you for what you had to go through to get us where we are. We promise to uphold the torch for the next leg. No matter who you are, transgender, cisgender, you have gender possibilities to explore. What feels good? What's fun? Your gender expression doesn't have to have commitment. You can experiment, especially here. This is a safe place to experiment with things that you wear. You don't have to be certain. You don't have to declare right away. There's no shame, only creativity and truth. So how can we all be better neighbors to those of marginalized genders and sexualities? Some of you may already do this. We can attend Pride, straight, gay, trans, cisgender. Attend Pride to show your support. You can say something when you hear unkind things, especially when we hear it from our neighbors who are also religious. The Reverend Tim Powers Reed, who is this really wonderful gay reverend, has this quote, "A gay Christian isn't a contradiction. It's a reflection of the diversity of God's love. But a hateful Christian, that's the real paradox." Amen, Tim. And finally, one of the most important things you can do, of course, is you can vote. We have a big election. Early voting is happening right now, and it can really determine what life is going to be like for our queer and trans neighbors and loved ones in the future. So, may we dig in and sing out until we make the paradise we dream about. May it be so. And please be ready for our fire drill.